So I think we've spent enough time talking about the Joe Biden campaign and Kamala Harris. Now let's turn to the Trump campaign
All
Yeah.
right,
and talk about him screwing with the
US
U.S. Postal Service in order
Yes.
to potentially benefit himself because of coronavirus. There is going to be a giant increase in absentee voting. I am also voting absentee. Like, even if it wasn't for coronavirus, I would vote absentee because I'm still voting in this district, even though voting in the 5th district, even though Blacksburg is in the 9th.
Right.
So, yeah, when I moved to college, Blacksburg is in the 9th. So
I'm voting in Williamsburg, so I don't know if I'll be voting by mail or not yet.
okay. But I voted by mail in this recent congressional primary that we had. So got that experience down. And Trump has been very vocal about his opposition to mail-in voting, saying it's going to rig the election against the Republicans. And I have a clip from CBS Evening News that really does a good job just illustrating the basic situation at hand, and we can give our reactions right after we watch it.
A backlog of undelivered mail is piling up in post offices around the country. Now, with widespread use of mail-in ballots expected in November because of the coronavirus, workers are blaming the new Postmaster General, a top Republican campaign donor who has given more than $1.1 million to the Trump Victory Fund. Here's CBS's Ben Tracy.
Okay. Today, President Trump continued his unsubstantiated attacks on voting by mail.
This is going to be the greatest election disaster in history.
And now there are concerns that cost-cutting at the Postal Service, overseen by a key Trump ally, could undermine postal workers' ability to deliver ballots in time to be counted, allowing President Trump to question the election.
If you do universal mail-ins with millions and millions of ballots, you're never going to know what the real result of an election is.
Louis DeJoy is the new Postmaster General and a Trump donor.
I am direct and decisive, and I don't mince words.
CBS News has learned that after assuming his position last month, DeJoy forced cost-cutting measures leading to undelivered mail piling up at post offices across the country. And CBS News confirmed this internal Postal Service directive that outlines an operational pivot, saying extra trips to deliver mail are no longer authorized, and that we may see mail left behind or mail on the workroom floor or docks, which is not typical.
Mail is backing up, is getting delayed.
Mark Dimenstein is president of the American Postal Workers Union.
We're being demanded in one way or another with these new policies to delay mail. That's against everything we stand for.
The Postal Service has struggled financially for years and lost $9 billion last year alone.
The Postal Service is a joke.
Postmaster General DeJoy declined our request for an interview, but in a statement, the Postal Service says it is in a financially unsustainable position, and despite any assertions to the contrary, we are not slowing down election mail or any other mail. Today, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi accused President Trump of trying to delegitimize the election.
He wants to cancel the election or postpone the election. Really? Did he learn that from Putin or something? They want to diminish the capacity of the postal system to work in a timely fashion.
Today, White House senior advisor Stephen Miller railed against mail-in ballots here at the White House. He said nobody who mails in a ballot has their identity confirmed. That is just not true. States have several safeguards in place to prevent fraud, including signature analysis and barcodes on the ballots. And Nora, overall, mail-in voting fraud is very rare.
Some important fact checks. Ben Tracy, thank you.
Oh, definitely with the mail. Of course, Donald Trump is opposed to in-mail voting because it's going to hurt his campaign, because many of his voters have advocated for going to polls, lifting restrictions, and also he has encouraged many states to, in the past, to liberate.
That's the thing. He thinks it'll help his campaign, but the people who are going to stay home and vote by mail are older people who are more likely to get sick, who are actually worried about their health.
Yeah,
so
more or less.
In fact, it could be that it ends up helping the Democrats.
Yeah, it can affect his campaign, but more so his base is really geared into this, going to polls places, and a lot of it, majority of his base agrees with that.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
what he likes to project, but I don't actually think that's entirely true.
But like it's based on the idea that, when turnout is high, Democrats win. When turnout is low, Republicans lose.
Right.
And when we look at
Yeah, that's what it's
states,
based on.
yeah, when we look at states like Oregon, who do their elections almost entirely by mail, the turnout is much higher. And there's a reason for that, because like the pressure of the ballot box is not something that's talked about too much. Because like especially like if there's a line, like some people go to the polls undecided, so like they make their decision after they step inside the booth. And then some like there's a lot of pressure because there is a line behind you. And like whereas like with the mail-in ballot, you just automatically receive it in the mail. In the ideal system, with absentee you have to request it. But like in Oregon, they just send you the ballot way ahead of time, and you have all that time to like decide like who to vote for. And so like you're able, there's not a whole lot of pressure involved, and not everyone is able to get to their polling place. So yeah, so like I can understand, I think Republicans understand that, because even though like the Democratic Party is center right, as far as like the establishment of the Democratic Party and the leadership of the Democratic Party, their policies are definitely more preferable to Republican policies, right? So Republicans can't really win on the merit of their ideas. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's why the Republicans are the ones fighting to keep, the Electoral College. The Democrats want to, I mean, typically that's the way it goes. But
unless it's the Iowa caucus, in which Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, and a lot of the states that have and a lot of states that have restrictions on in-mail voting are disproportionately Republican.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is a bit different. The circumstances under the pandemic. This might be partially anecdotal, but I know that a lot of old people, including older people in my family, aren't going to go out and vote if they can't vote by mail because they're terrified of getting sick and dying. And and it's no secret that most older people are Republican. In his head, I think Trump thinks that this makes sense for him, but in practice, I don't think it's a good strategy.
Right. And also that clip that I showed you was like, if you saw like the date on it, it was from back in late July. There's certainly been more developments. It was a huge story, like within this past week, because of I think like Trump is ramping up like his rhetoric about kneecapping the postal service, or like has he actually like taken measures to actively do that? Like other than just like
he has opposed the $25 billion in funding. He has opposed that and the extra $3 billion the Democrats were asking for because of like in-mail voting, and he's of course promoting this myth of voter fraud. And remember, the representative that was at William Barr's hearing, she repeated that it had like a 0.006% fraud rate.
Yeah. Thing is, like, I saw like it was something that David Pakman tweeted. David Pakman is a progressive radio show host, and he's also on YouTube. Be sure to check him out if you're watching us and you haven't heard of him, which I mean, I guess that's unlikely. But he tweeted out, he pointed out that voter fraud, is like 0.0001%. Like that happens like that much of the time. Whereas like, COVID has, at minimum like a 1% death rate in America, but like we're rushing into open schools. Whereas, voter fraud is a huge problem, right?
Yeah, this voter fraud line strikes me as like kind of just a standard right-wing, a standard right-wing strategy to fearmonger, that there are people out there who want to steal this election from, the honest.
It's basically a playbook they're taking the playbook of Democrats of Russia stealing, like Russia meddling election, but turning it and saying, oh, voter fraud's messing with the election, not Russia, voter fraud.
And like on that point, I don't think Nancy Pelosi is helping anyone when she says like stuff like, "Oh, did he learn that from Putin?" To postpone
Yeah,
and stuff. So
because they're just taking that and just using it against Democrats.
yeah, no, that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah. So, ultimately, what are you sure do you think this really does have the potential to just like backfire on Trump if he's successful
I think
in stopping mail-in voting?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if the ACLU sued him, but I think some organizations are going to sue him over this opposing funding at a time when it's very necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also the additional point to be made that I don't know if it was in the last week or not, but Trump had talked about increasing the cost of postage or the cost of stamps and whatnot, and that would literally amount to a poll tax in an election or mail-in voting.
And it'll have a disproportionate impact on poor people.
Right.
So, like instead of just one
just
stamp,
to finish
what would it be? Just like 2 or 3 stamps, maybe? Or it's like.
Well, but specifically, if you increase the cost of that, that would amount to tax, which is against the 24th Amendment. It's Trump has not shied away from breaking the Constitution before, but this I think would be pretty absurd.
Yeah, even I don't know.
Responsible for it, but.
Even if I play devil's advocate here, even if it's not that much, it's still ethically questionable to raise that right before election time.
Yeah, because I think it's obvious to everyone, what he's doing, even to Republicans. Trump has said as much that, he thinks the Democrats will win if we're all allowed to vote by mail.
Yeah.
The
states that have the support it happen to be blue.
Yeah. So, surprisingly, I commend Amy Klobuchar for coming up with a national, proposing a national voting by mail system. So, props to Amy Klobuchar. You'll rarely ever hear me say that.
Yep.
But yeah, this has the potentiality to be worse than the idiots who advocate for privatization of the postal service. Idiots like Dave Rubin.
Right.
Yeah.
The competition will just
I don't think people really understand. I don't think people really understand what the postal service does.
I know.
The reason it's so inefficient. There's a reason it's not good at making money. It's because it's a
national. It's like a national service. It's like telling the USSR that them controlling the resources is not profitable.
Yeah.
Well, and also profit. The profit motive can only get you so far. If the United States Postal Service didn't exist, there would be a lot of places in America where that wouldn't receive mail at all.
Well, yeah. When Dave Rubin was on Joe Rogan talking about privatization of the National Postal Service, he was saying it could be taken up by companies by FedEx, Amazon, all of these different organizations, but he leaves out the Joe Rogan obviously called him out on his bullshit, but Joe Rogan leaves out the important points that and Michael Brooks talked about this conversation in his book Against the Web, in which I promise I'll do a review of that soon and put it on this channel. He left out the obvious points, how much those companies rely on the US Postal Service. I don't get sometimes I get an Amazon package from UPS, but a lot of times, especially if it's a smaller package, I might just get it in the mailbox. Sometimes it is, or sometimes it is if it's a bigger package, it's dropped off on my doorstep by a mail car or a mail truck.
UPS, definitely. I receive most of my mail from United States Postal Service. UPS, I get only if I get a package. If we're doing that and we look at it, because I had a debate earlier this week with another guy. We were debating over whether USPS should be outplaced by private services. He was arguing necessarily that the private service would be better. Okay, yes, admittedly, yes, it can be better, because even CBS said the United States Postal Service was failing in recent years, lost $9 billion. But I had to point out to him, and he still denied my point, that even if you went here and got the better option, they have to raise the price for one, because if you look at a macro level, it costs the same to buy trucks, build the place, but the thing is, the population size is so small, it doesn't, like, you have to, like, cover your basic bottom cost. So it's going to cost higher in rural areas than it is a bigger city where it's more profitable to actually use stamps, send mail, hire people. And even if they want to go farther and have higher quality, they can further justify and raise their price. So the private service will essentially become monopoly over USPS, because if we go by argument, USPS is shitty service and the private sector service is better, customers are going to say, I have to suck it up and go with this really expensive service, even though a monopoly is supposed to benefit you. Like, demonopolizing companies is supposed to benefit you by lowering prices.
Yeah, and this is the thing that,
what about competition? What about competition?
Right. But like the thing people don't seem to understand is there's a reason the Postal Service isn't a great money maker, and it's because it delivers, it does everything that those other companies that are driven by the profit motive won't do. That's why we need that Postal Service.
Yeah.
Because otherwise the market wouldn't take care of certain folks.
Definitely, especially poor areas, rural areas, like a lot of those areas will be left out. And not everybody has access to internet. Not everybody receives emails and stuff like that. So it's not saying, oh, why don't everybody just go to email and stuff? Like, a lot of these places can't even get internet.
Right, yeah. I think at some point internet will be considered a basic human right. But until then, I mean...
I give props to Ralph Northam for advocating for that kind of thing. You know, as conservative as Ralph is compared to others, you know, like that's something he's advocating for, and I'll give him credit.